Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Shape the System. Talking to Josh Howard today from Single Use Ain't Sexy, which has got a lot of S's in it, which is not great for me, but an awesome name, which we're going to get to a bit later on. Josh and I are actually at an event in Sydney about a month ago. About a month ago.
Yeah.
About a month ago. He was moderating a panel. I was doing an interview, and we got to chatting afterwards, and I think there's a whole interesting backstory here. And we're going to get to the product later, as we always do, but I want to start with problem, and it's to do with plastic, and obviously it's to do with single-use plastic. And so we've talked a little bit about this before on the show, but actually what I wanted to do was try to understand this a little bit more in a narrower context. I want to understand how we've arrived in single-use plastic and plastic generally for all of these kind of things we do around the home, whether this is hand washers or, soaps or dishwashing detergents or any of these kind of things. That's how we seem to have arrived. I'm not sure that's how we started. So let's dive into plastics in the home and try to understand it a bit more.
All right. Well, it's a good place to start because it probably syncs up perfectly with the genesis behind which I kind of started this business, which was this idea that I was just chucking out so much crap that how is this ever going to sustain itself? And so I looked over at my bin and I just saw all these single-use plastic bottles, and I thought, oh my God, this is every household. This is my home times my neighbour's homes times every suburb in the country times every home in the world who's consuming in the way that we do. And so I just thought, all right, this is completely unsustainable and I've got to do something. And it kind of tied into this feeling I had. It's actually called eco-anxiety, which is this sense that nothing you do is going to be significant enough to combat the world's environmental problems, and then you almost don't know where to start. When people give you like a massive to-do list, and then you're like, I don't know where to start. Yeah. And so I think that there's a real I'm having one of those days today, by the way, just as an aside.
An eco-anxiety day today?
No.
Let's hold on. What triggered the eco-anxiety today specifically? Or not knowing where to start?
No. It was no. I mean, I had an endless to-do list today, but my eco-anxiety permeates my decisions every day. And
okay, great. Okay, good.
I think a lot of us share that. And whenever I talk to people or I'm out there doing talks or whatever, there's a real common theme there, which is we all feel a little bit hopeless and a little bit despondent that nothing we do will be significant enough to make a dent in what's happening environmentally. And so if I look at plastics in the home, I think it was maybe, now I'm not an expert in this, but I'm fascinated with this topic. I think it was around the 1950s when you had rampant consumerism come into our culture because all of a sudden people were earning a lot more money and they had disposable income. And people really started spending money on products in the home without any kind of regard for whether or not they were environmental or part of a circular economy, which of course didn't really exist then in the way that we know it does now. So, I remember there were these hilarious ads. I'm obsessed with advertising with brands. I remember there were these hilarious ads where it would be like, a 1950s, Brady Bunch style home, where it would be all plastic plates and plastic cutlery. And then the USP was that you could just chuck everything out. You'd never have to wash a dish. So from then to now, obviously we just have these kind of home machines that just produce rubbish and produce plastic and produce crap that ends up going to landfill. And so I guess the whole kind of mission behind our business is to help people save single-use plastics from landfill at a very basic level.
Right. And you talked a little bit before about this idea of throwing things away. And I think a lot of technology, and by technology I don't mean like digital technology, but just technology generally, is about, a shift to convenience, right? There's I can't remember the exact talk. I think it's a TED talk, but they're essentially reflecting on this fact that when you introduce a washing machine into a home, the person who had to otherwise do the hand washing the clothes, and that was 70% of their day, 2 or 3 days a week, no longer has to do that, right? And so you start with kind of, actually shifting a whole bunch of work away and enabling people to have more leisure time. But then over time, we start to, get to the point where you pull out an app and your food arrives, and you have someone sort of moves your mouth for you and helps you to chew it for you. You don't even need to eat it yourself. I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is that a big part of what we've ended up with from 1950s to now is a shift to where everything is so heavily convenienced. And so I think about soap as a good example. Even 15, 20 years ago, growing up, soap in the home was literally a bar of soap. And it was this thing that would sit on the bench, and you'd kind of use it, and then it gets scungy and you never use all of it, and you'd kind of throw it away and you spend half your life cleaning up under it. It's like a lot of these moves in plastic in the home because people just can't be bothered dealing with the direct product and the physical product. Is that what's happening, do you think?
That's a good question. I think it could be applicable for all different areas of our life where suddenly convenience starts to take over. And the question is this product actually better, or did we just get used to it? And so we're not going back to what we had.
Right.
So I'm only 32, but I grew up using bar soap for probably the first 15 years of my life. And now I think bar soap's like so old-fashioned. Having said that,
Right.
What's interesting with that one specific example is that bar soap is having a huge renaissance. And now people are moving back to bar forms of different personal care and cleaning products because they think that they can use it. It comes in a box and there's no single-use plastic as a result. So I think what our business is doing is it's trying to marry up the new kind of like consumer trends and what people want, which is some level and some modicum of sustainability and mission behind their products, but using it in categories where people can still use the same things that they like. So, for example, often people will say, like, why use your product when you can use bar soap? And I'll say, oh, well, what we're doing is the best of both worlds because it's marrying up a liquid hand soap that people like, but as part of a circular economy where it's not just producing single-use plastic. So I love marrying up those two kind of like wants and needs for people. And I think that's probably where things are heading, is figuring out what products either people like more or have gotten used to using more, and then figure out sustainable ways of doing them.
Yeah, that's a super interesting thought, because I think when we spoke very early on on this podcast to guys at Trades for Good, they were basically saying the same thing, which is you can't expect people to want to put products in their home that aren't beautiful and aren't convenient and aren't priced well. Like, why would people? They're just not going to do that. And so if we've landed at a kind of a pattern, if you like, for a particular product, whether it's hand soap or something else, then your opportunity to be more sustainable has to work out some other part of the value prop, unless you have some other way of doing it that's even better than liquid. I can't imagine what that is, but maybe some vapor that you just put your hands in when you walk past it or something. There's still plenty of opportunities, I'm sure. And just there's something else that you just sort of touched on there, that it was kind of the amalgamation of having something that someone uses today in the way they use it, but delivering it to them in a different way. That sounds, that's a kind of a product-led type of thinking, but what's your background though? Is it in product development, that type of thing? Or is it, you said you had a fascination with advertising. I'm assuming it's more in that vein.
Yeah, I don't have a product background at all. I actually used to be a lawyer. I never practiced as a lawyer, but I got admitted, and the day I got admitted, I never had anything to do with it ever again. So it was one of those things that comes up for me in terms of practicality when I'm writing a contract or checking something that's legal.
Sure.
But other than that, my background is mostly advertising and media and marketing. So I first started working in TV and then made the transition into kind of startups and I guess entrepreneurship. But I think more important than all of that, I just love the psychology around brand marketing, market trends, people finding passion and purpose. So for me, I feel like I'm bringing all those things together and created the type of business and the type of brand that I kind of always wish existed before it did. So that's been a lot of fun for me.
Right. Yeah, and I want to get more into your background in a little bit, so we'll definitely come back to that. But I do want to understand a bit about how the product works, because you basically said it works the same way as the product does today in terms of your day-to-day usage of it, but you've changed the model of how that product is bought, delivered, reused. Can we break that down just a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So if you think about our product, it's basically a little dissolvable white tablet. I like to say it's kind of like a Barocca tablet, but for hand soap. And so you mix this little white tablet with tap water in one of our sexy white reusable glass soap bottles. And so it takes 30 minutes to dissolve. And then in the bottle, once it's fully dissolved, it still looks like it's water. But when you pump the solution out, it comes out as a thick white foam that you wash your hands with. And then when you're done, instead of chucking an empty single-use plastic soap bottle into landfill, you fill it back up with tap water, you drop another tablet in, and the whole cycle starts again. So from a product perspective, what I think is interesting about what we're doing is we're not actually reinventing new technology. So if you think about it, I love putting it in terms of the just add water category. So this category of products has existed for a long time. So like my grandparents' generation, they were using denture cleaning tablets, right? When I was a young kid, my parents were cooking with chicken stock cubes. I would drink powdered cordial. So they're all things which are leveraging the resource of water. And the thing that I find fascinating is, why would you pay to ship water? Like, there is nothing more mad than that concept, because you're paying for water already. It's a resource that's coming out of your tap in your kitchen or your bathroom. And so the whole kind of like methodology behind our brand is just mail people these little tablets. They're the raw ingredients, and mix them with water that you're already getting for free. And the thing is most liquid-based products in your home are like 95% water. So you only need the raw ingredients. And so the whole idea is buy the bottle once, get the tablets in the mail. And the thing is it's helping minimize people's carbon footprint too, because you're not shipping thousands of liters of liquid-based products around on the back of a ship or a truck. So I think for us, it's about leveraging the effervescence and dissolvable bicarb soda technology that has already existed for other products, but doing it in new categories around the home. So for me, hand soap was an obvious one, because I felt like it's a category that is really significant in people's minds. You know, the way that a bottle of hand soap has become like a status symbol on your kitchen sink or your bathroom sink is really interesting to me. And I thought there was space for a brand like us to come through and represent being that status symbol for people who care about aesthetics and sustainability, because I don't feel like you should have to compromise on something looking cool just because it does well. And earlier, to your point, but we're all about trying to integrate those two messages together so that, you know, I love the idea that people would want to use our products because they think it's a cool brand and they like what it stands for and they think it looks good, even if they didn't know that what we're doing is based in being more sustainable. So I think marrying up those two kind of priorities have been a big part of why we've been so successful.
Yeah. And just on that point, because I think I'm kind of curious, and I'm guessing as someone with a marketing/advertising brain, you've done this work, so stop me if you haven't. But my presumption is that you've sort of looked at maybe half a dozen hand soaps in the category and said, what do the other ones say about the person who buys them? Is there part of this kind of map of the ecosystem? If you're using this one, you're this kind of person. Like, I'd love to know more about that.
I think that's a really good question. I think I have done that less intentionally and more subconsciously. Like, you walk into a supermarket aisle and it's just that instinctive, like, what does that product make me feel? What does that aesthetic mean? Like, how are they communicating? So I like to be conscious of what our competition is doing, but I never want to let it dictate the decisions that I make for our business, because then I think you're being very reactive and it can create a strange situation where suddenly you're just making decisions based on other people's decisions, where I'd like to be much more on the front foot and be like, no, let's just do this because I think this is cool, or let's do this because I know our customers will like this. So yes, partly, and I guess that those kind of like decisions have informed how we've decided to market our brand. So what I find really interesting in the sustainability space is there's not many people marketing in the way that we are, which is exactly why I created this specific type of brand. So in the sustainability space, it is usually dominated by women and female founders. It's very much around the kind of craft paper, brown paper bag aesthetic, greens, pastels. There's a lot of kind of imagery. Pictures of dolphins, of dogs, of kids in Byron Bay and all this stuff. And I think that is totally perfect for that demographic, but I
Right.
also think that there's a huge demographic of people
Right.
who really want to be part of that sustainability world, but not necessarily kind of relate to that look or that aesthetic all the time. And so I just think there's a massive white space
Right.
to do something different. And that's what we're doing, I guess.
And that's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of the time we get kind of so hung up on a practical level. This is what the thing does, right? You would send a tablet to your home, and then that's how you avoid having to buy it over and over again with a different container every time and ship the water and the other challenges. But if you go into these spaces assuming that every customer or user, or whatever the right term is, has the same set of belief structures, then you might ultimately create something that just doesn't appeal to them, even though the functionality of it appeals to them. And I guess part of your play into the market then, if I'm reading this right, is that you're thinking there's a whole set of people who do want sustainability but don't want barefoot kids in Byron when they make those choices, or they are happy with that, but that just actually doesn't speak to them in the way that I mean, for the people who aren't seeing this from a video perspective, the bottle is essentially it's a pure white bottle. It's quite a utilitarian design. It's got a really strong black font on it that just says "single use ain't sexy," which as much speaks the message, but also gets out of the way in a lot of respects. Just as a curiosity for me, what is the kind of the target within the demographic for the way that you've set up the branding?
The demographics behind the customer base really surprised me because I didn't know what to expect. I probably went into it not fully prepared. So I think we have a majority of our customers are women, and I got to say,
Right.
I'm like so surprised by how much women are carrying the torch in the sustainability movement. It's like
Interesting.
created this really interesting dynamic where it's almost as if like women are the ones who have just like taken this issue on and are carrying it on their backs alone, and men almost opt out. I don't think consciously, but it's really interesting. And
Right.
Friends of mine or peers of mine who have businesses in this space across different product categories say the exact same thing. Now, that doesn't mean that men don't care about sustainability. Obviously, men do. We do. And maybe as well, there's still some kind of like old dynamics that men aren't buying products for the home as much as women. So I think that's a big part of it too. But it is really interesting.
Right.
I think our key age demographic is 25 to 44. So I think a lot of older people, it's not that, they've missed the boat on sustainability. I just think their habits are so entrenched that it might be hard to get a 70-year-old to start using something new that they think is, a bit weird or a bit different or takes effort. Having said that, I very much see our brand as like the gateway drug into sustainability for people. So I always say single use ain't sexy should be the first stop for someone and not the last, because the whole idea is that if you want the mass market and a lot of people to be sustainable, you've just got to make it really easy and really seamless and the same price. Otherwise, it gets put in the too hard basket, and your whole mission of like democratizing access to sustainability is never practical enough to actually get integrated into people's habits. And so for me, it's about saying, hey, guys, this is so easy. Try this. And then what's the next step? Maybe the next step is you'll, buy biodegradable bin bags at the supermarket or whatever it is. So it's just those baby steps. And like I said, with pricing, like our tablets are $3 each. So it's $3 a bottle. So it's not like we're making these $15 each and pricing people out of the market, because I always have felt so passionate that if you're going to bring a product to market that you're saying is helping the environment, the last thing you want to do is make it so elitist or price people out of being able to buy it that they can't help the environment. And so that's been a big priority, is just making it accessible to people.
Right. And I've got a couple of questions on that, because I think I obviously, I'm sample size of one, so I'm only going to compare my own situation. I moved house end of last year, call it. I brought all my hand washers with me, or hand soaps and all the things. Everything that's in a plastic bottle got put into one tub, and then those all got redistributed back into the home. And I'm still getting through the hand wash that I had from 4 months ago, and it'll probably take me another 3 or 4 months to use it. And I guess the reason I bring it up is I understand that the numbers for these types of products in the home collectively are in the hundreds of thousands, or I think millions of bottles a year. But it doesn't reflect my own usage. I'm trying to work out where the usage is. I'm trying to work out am I just not using hand soap enough compared to compared to everyone else? And I guess the reflection I had is that a lot of the usage of these products is starting to emerge in high traffic areas, right? I spend 10 to 12 hours a day at work. Admittedly, some of that at home at the moment, obviously. But at our work, there's a bathroom that has 70 people on our floor that go through it, all the time, and in any kind of cafe environment. How are these products flowing into? How do you see them, and your own product specifically, flowing into these kind of environments where a lot of people are a lot of the time beyond the home?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I guess it's not that complicated. If you think about it, we just need to be wherever people are washing their hands. And so, like you said, that can be, yes, it can be your bathroom at home, but it can be like this. It depends how many people you live with too. Like a household full of 6 people is churning through hand soap, especially over the last year. So it's like if you're in a Australian family home and you've got maybe, I don't know, 2 bathrooms and a sink or something, you've got 3 sinks or a laundry, that could be 3 or 4 bottles. And then at your workplace, you'd have multiple bathrooms where you have heaps of people going to the bathroom, washing their hands every day, right? And then it's hospitality, so it's restaurants, bars, cafes, hotel bathrooms, it's gyms, it's co-working spaces. So the home is not the only place where people are washing their hands, obviously, as you've just identified. So I think for us, what's really important is making sure that we have a really kind of like robust strategy, which we do, to get into not out of home places. So I think hospitality is a massive opportunity. I have these grand plans to kind of get into these huge hotel chains, but in a post-COVID world, I don't really think people are going to want to share hygiene bottles like soap and stuff with people who stayed in the room before them. So that might have to get put on ice for a little bit. But, the hotel industry is just chucking out millions of those tiny little bottles of soap and conditioner every year. So I do think that there's big opportunity for us. And the thing that I like about our model and our product is that it's just easy. Like, say someone finds this in their work bathroom, it's so easy for them to just imagine doing it at home. It's like, oh yeah, simple. So I think for us, a big way of getting into people's heads is by them discovering us in more public environments to then buy the product for their home environment.
Yeah, and I think the brand that I think of when I think about that in a parallel is obviously the Thank You brand that has been like is trafficked into hospitality and into the workplace. Like there's much chance you'll find it there as you'll find it in your own home.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some wonderful crossover in some of these models, by the way. Hey, I want to talk a little bit about the economics of this because you mentioned, okay, the tablet retails for $3. Normal bottle of hand soap probably costs around $4 to $5, so it's kind of in the ballpark, cheaper or as cheap. But you spoke a little bit before about how the cost structure changes when you don't have to ship water everywhere. You're using a direct to sales model as well. How's the economics of this product for you different to the person who's putting up a brand and putting a dolphin on it and then sticking it on a shelf in Coles or Woolies?
Well, I guess there's that old kind of like dichotomy between brands which are going direct to consumer and then those which are going through retailers. So the fact that you're not going through a retailer means that you're not losing margin. Having said that, you're probably not doing the same amount of volumes as you would if you're going through a Coles or Woolies. So at the moment, we're direct to consumer only, starting to now talk with some of Australia's biggest retailers about getting into their stores. So I think that's something that we're really interested in doing. The economics, I guess they work because the weight of the products is lighter without water. So in the direct-to-consumer e-commerce world, a lot of it is based on how the weight affects your margins. So this is an empty bottle, right? If this was full of water, it would be 3 times the weight and cost me so much that it probably wouldn't even be economical to sell products online through our website. So I think that's interesting. Exactly. Right. And the second piece is once you buy the bottles once, you're only buying the tablet refills. So these tablet refills, 10 little tablets, we send them in a really light little thin cardboard envelope, and that is the equivalent of 10 full bottles of soap that that weigh 250 mil each. So you can see why the model works. You're just shipping the raw ingredient and you're not having to pay for these really heavy bottles of soap. So it's an interesting dynamic and something I've thought a lot about as we've built out the business and built out the business model and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I guess that was kind of be my question. I think when you operate at a certain level of scale, and I'm going to just use a comparison point, right? Going a direct-to-consumer model where people have to discover it and actively buy it versus sitting on a shelf, millions of people, foot traffic in tens of thousands of stores nationally or even globally, then the economics for your production of that product are completely different, right? If you manufacture 10,000 versus 10 million, obviously it's going to be heaps cheaper per unit. And there's kind of, to your point, a dichotomy, but there's also for you and for single use Ain't Sexy to have a huge, huge impact, you actually need to be shipping millions of units, at some point, because that's what the impact is, how many people are using it in some form. Like, how you said you're thinking about stores now, is this, and actually interestingly, I went to your site yesterday to try and buy some because I'm going to run out of soap soon and I want to try it, but I couldn't buy the product. I'm interested in the supply chain part of what you're doing here and how you're kind of where you're up to, and then how you try to magnify it from here.
Firstly, thanks for going to buy our stuff. Don't you buy it, I'll just send you some. But you weren't able to buy it because we've sold out. So we've sold out twice in our first 12 months of trading. It's our first birthday in 4 days on the 6th of April, which has been, thank you, mate, which has been a little bit surprising because I wasn't expecting to sell this much product. But it has made us think very seriously now about how we forecast all of our inventory and supply chain and how we make sure that we don't run out of product, because it's really interesting. The dynamic is when you sell out, it's awesome. And of course, it's better than not selling out. But the problem it poses is that you lose momentum, and every brand is built on momentum. And so losing momentum is really difficult because it's almost like, in economic terms, it's like the goodwill that you have if you're exiting a business, that a potential acquirer would pay for. And so for us, it's about trying to make sure that we're marrying up what the demand is with how much we can actually supply. So what happened at the start of COVID is I was planning on launching this business before COVID started. So I already had our stock. But obviously in the last year, people have been, using hand soap and washing their hands much more than they were previously. And so for us, we just weren't expecting to sell out like that. Now, having said that, one of the interesting things about the COVID experience is that I'm from Melbourne, right? So Melburnians experienced COVID, I think, in a much more intense way than other people did relative to Aussie cities. And what happened is there was just a freak out, right? So at the start of COVID, everyone freaked out. No one knew what was happening. I think rightly so, people were prioritizing health and hygiene and hand washing and being safe over any other concern, including environmental or sustainability issues. But what happened is once the immediacy of COVID kind of occurred, people realized that the environmental issues would continue on beyond COVID. So you were actually dealing with dual crises. One was a public health crisis, and the other is an ongoing environmental crisis. And so we positioned ourselves in the middle of both and basically created a value proposition where we were saying, look, it's really important that you and your family stay safe, but at the same time, it's really important that we continue protecting the planet. And so by doing that, I think we appealed to the immediacy of people's concerns and also the longer term effects of what they know is going to happen environmentally. And so I think for us now, that's a space that we're going to have to play in, especially over the next few years, as hygiene and health is a bigger focus for people than it ever has been. I think it will continue to be so for years to come. So it's definitely been an interesting dynamic. And when I started the business, I thought that the environmental issue was the only thing we would ever talk about. But obviously COVID changed that. And so we've had to just, I guess, adapt like everyone else.
Yeah. And I think also they're kind of linked in people's minds anyway, right? Like the lack of hygiene in the kind of broad sense has led to something coming from a different species, presumably, into ours. And hygiene is a kind of a bucket term for, not having, I'm thinking about the bubonic plague, 1,000 years ago, but similar kind of problem, right? There's an issue when you're allowing things and pathogens or whatever it is to come into your ecosystem. I'm not even going to say into your home. So I think that makes sense. I want to understand, you spoke a little bit before about kind of the, dentures and the, the soup, like stock from a soup, like these kind of products where there's a physical thing that gets dissolved in water. What other categories are you guys thinking about specifically for this model for yourselves? And do you end at that type of approach, or do you think, how do we take an innovative approach to any of these kind of categories?
The idea around building a massive tablet-based system of products in the home that have traditionally been water-based. So if you then think about which categories of products that means going into, there's probably two main ones. One is personal care and the other is cleaning. So for me, I love the idea of creating tablet-based products in each of those categories. I think the body stuff is interesting because every day you're in the shower, you have bottles that you're using, but then you go into the kitchen and it's like Windex and bathroom cleaner and, all this stuff. And so I think being able to create tablet-based kind of like innovations in those categories are interesting. So for me, that would be things like body wash, face wash, conditioner, shampoo, shower tablets, bath bombs. On the cleaning side, it would be glass cleaner, window cleaner, multi-surface cleaner, laundry tablets, dishwasher tablets. So one thing that I love, like a little passion project of mine, is like working on our new product development and figuring out like new or cool ways that we could tabletize products. So the other thing then too is you have to use good ingredients.
I love that you managed to verb that, by the way.
To tabletize, yeah. I have a whole glossary.
I feel like that should be like on a t-shirt or something.
I've got a whole glossary of made up terms that really mean nothing but also mean everything.
If for a brain that came out of advertising, if that wasn't the case, I'd be kind of upset and disappointed. There was something interesting. Like, I'm actually curious, someone with a background in law, but also spent a bunch of time in advertising, but working out how to create a tablet that when it dissolves in water, it creates the product that you're expecting in terms of its effectiveness and how it feels and how it comes off the skin or whatever it is that are the critical kind of usability factors. How are you even doing how do you know what to put in the tablet? Whose brain is arriving at that? What's the science there? I guess science might not be the right word, but
it's not my brain, because I'm not programmed to think in a very intellectual way about chemistry and physics and pharmaceuticals and all that stuff. That's definitely not my area of strength. So I think I've done a good job of surrounding myself with people who are really good at things that I've got no idea how to do. And so that's been finding the right manufacturing partner. I spoke with over 90 potential manufacturers, which was a character building experience. And then also getting the right advisory board and people around me who know what they're doing in those areas. When I first started the business, maybe this was like a lot of young entrepreneurs, you're like, I've got to be amazing at everything. And then I soon realized that if I apportion my time as a resource, it's a much better use of my skills and expertise to focus on the stuff I'm good at and then work really hard to get smart people into the business who can help me do the things that I've got no idea about. So science would be one of them. And of course, I've worked my ass off and I think I'm a quick study. So I've learned a lot about it, but I'm in no means the brains behind the science, and I never will be. And that's okay. Like I know other co-founders who are brilliant at that side of things, but maybe not as strong on the marketing side. So everyone, I guess, has their skill set.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think there's a couple of things in this for me. Like if I think about kind of the poster child for sustainability starts with materials, reconsidering the materials. You think of Allbirds and probably some separate conversation about the way their brand works. But from a materials perspective, they've essentially said we're putting the wrong things to make shoes out of. And if we can innovate there, then we have a much better chance of building a much more sustainable product. So I think that approach is interesting. And we interviewed Julia and Geordie Kay a while back, also based out of Melbourne, a company called Great Wrap. Have you come across those guys yet?
I know those guys. It's awesome what they're doing.
Awesome what they're doing. But their approach when we spoke to them was to go, we know nothing about how this stuff gets made, so we're going to go and, learn the chemistry. Now, to be fair to your point, they went and sort of poked around the research, but then ultimately went and found people who really understood it to help actually land how the polymers and the formulas all work. And I'm guessing that's a similar thing here. And so the product development part of this is you think about a category and you think, why couldn't this be tabletized, to use your word? And then that group of people, either the manufacturers or your advisors, are there to say, well, here's the ingredients and here's how you put those together. And then there's kind of a process of arriving at the 54th version of that actually works and comes out and people like. Is that sort of how that process works or will work?
I think so. On the great wrap front, what they're doing is amazing. Biodegradable glad wrap or cling wrap, and they've just opened their own
Right.
production facility, so they're manufacturing it themselves. It's incredible, right? And Australian
Right.
made. The difference with us is that when I was trying to find a manufacturer, there was two options. Do I go for people who are making tablets, or do I go for people that are making hand soap? And then try and get them to do
Right.
it in the way that the other manufacturer would. So that was a fascinating experience because you know, and I ended up going with a tablet maker because they were the ones who had the technology, and what we had to do is then bring the right formula to that technology. So that finding a manufacturer was hard, like really hard, especially because we were first to market. And so what's happened now is there's a lot of other kind of copycats that have popped up, and that's okay. But it is easier to kind of do that when you're already seeing other stuff like that out there in market. So it's been an interesting experience. And when you're not programmed to think like a scientist, that side of things can start to become quite complicated. But I've learned a lot.
Right.
It's fascinating dealing with different manufacturers and what they do and how they do it and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just I could talk about this stuff specifically for ages because I find it fascinating, but I won't because it's maybe not the most interesting side of things. But I found it really interesting.
Depends who's listening. Yeah, I mean, look, if there's some cool links to some of the science behind some of this or some of that, like even from your own blog post, then give us those after, and we'll link those into the show. I want to sort of go back to the start here, though. You talked before about leaving a law degree, or no, not leaving it, doing the law degree, finishing the bar exam, getting the piece of paper, and then putting it in the third drawer from the top, and then walking out the door and joining like an advertiser. Like, what actually happened at that moment, and then how did that set of moments lead to to this?
I finished law. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was working in a deli. It was like my uni job, and a guy I was working with was like, "Oh, my
Yeah,
auntie's a TV producer. They're looking for a production assistant for a TV show, a big reality TV show. Would you be interested?" And I was like,
right,
"Yeah, sure. Why not? I'll give that a crack." Like I've always been interested in the media, and so that started me off on working in TV, and it was like so fun. I was like, "Oh my god, I can't
right,
believe this is what jobs can be like." And then I slowly
right,
started, I guess, working my way up into different production roles and then into like TV management style roles. And then jumped over to digital kind of advertising and digital media. It's fun. Like I'm just someone who just
like on the agency side.
loves having fun. Like I love only doing things which are really, really fun. And I feel like I've turned those aspects of my life into my work. So like this business is the hardest thing
Right,
I've ever done. And it is honestly just so difficult trying to make a business successful and having the different
right,
pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that will all fit together perfectly one day. And you can see that like years down the track, but trying to make it
right,
happen and convince other people that it exists and fund it and all that stuff, it just seems like this complex maze of like complete impossibilities, but that like you've got the code to crack it.
right.
And so I think for me is transitioning into this style of work has been like so fascinating and so interesting and really energizing that I feel now like what I'm starting to do is probably lay the groundwork for a career that is just based on trying to do and bring interesting products to market that are innovative and contributing in some significant way. I don't even know what that looks like yet, but I think
Yep.
this business has kind of been one of
Yeah.
my first forays into that style of work.
Yeah, more like there's unlimited number of problems. I think there's 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. It's sort of what we roll up to in the show, but there's countless problems inside of that. So you'll have no shortage of things to work on, I'm sure. But that still doesn't quite answer the question that I've got about at what point do you sitting in the advertising agency or come home from a long day and went, I need to come out of this production role or agency role or whatever it was at the time and and solve this particular problem. And I have a brainwave about a different way to solve it that's part of a product innovation, but then ultimately leads into the brand part. Like, can you narrow down onto that moment for me, or that set of moments?
I lived in New York for 4 years. I moved back to Australia about 18 months ago. And for my last year in New York, I was the co-founder of a business which was basically marrying up brands and really cool hospitality spaces. So brands would pay us to get their products placed in like the bathrooms of really high-end Airbnbs, for example. And so it was kind of like the final frontier of like commercialization, but in home type personal environments where people weren't getting spammed with ads. And what I found that the moment for me is that I was dealing with all of these direct to consumer founders and people with brands and products who wanted to get their items placed in these areas. And I just felt like they were having way more fun than I was. And I became obsessed with the idea of doing that myself. and moving across onto Can you relate to that, mate?
I just wasn't expecting that. That's why I'm laughing with you, I assure you. But I just literally wasn't expecting where that was going. So please keep going.
Yeah. And so it went from us being, like a distributor of products to me feeling like my true passion lay in the creation of the product and the creation of the brand. And now that I'm in it, I'm so in my flow and so happy about being on this side that it was, absolutely the right decision. And so when I decided that was the direction I wanted to go in, then I had to start thinking about like, all right, well, what would I bring out and why and what's important to me and what could be a big business and how could I commercialize purpose? Because I'm a big advocate for putting profit and purpose on the same page. So if your business model is doing good, scaling and commercializing that just means your impact will be greater rather than, say, for me personally, having like a not-for-profit or a charity, which is something that I toyed around with a lot. And so then I was looking at, all right, so what are the issues? So like I said at the start, my bin is just full of plastic bottles. I'm like, this is out of control. Like, why? How am I consuming this much? Like, even my recycling bin is full of stuff. Like, what is going on? And then looking at that technology and how it had been used in other parts of the home and other products. So in the US, there were other brands doing this with cleaning sprays and coffee descaling tablets and all that kind of stuff. In Japan, there was a company that had little paper flakes of soap, and you just take one out with you and you put water on your hand, you put a flake on your hand and you wash it. So it was about marrying up like what I thought I was interested in, which is sustainability, with other technology that was on the market but wasn't being used in categories such as hand soap yet in Australia. So it was a fascinating coming together of a lot of different forces, and I definitely went through periods where I was like, shit, like what am I going to do? Like what do I care about? Like what do I want to throw myself into that I'm actually passionate about? And so this has ended up being an amalgamation of all of those things for me.
That's interesting you say that, because I think there's often a preconceived notion that someone's found their life calling in a particular product or vertical, and then that's kind of, there's a permanence to that. And I think you mentioned it a little earlier on about ultimately this might be something that someone would acquire and then, scale it even further from there. And you're attached to solving problems with purpose, but not necessarily attached to this being the thing that you have to do for the rest of your existence. Have I sort of reading between the lines correctly on that?
I feel like there's a lot of impermanence in everything that all of us do. Like the days are over when, for most of us, where you go and work at one workplace for 40 years and then you check out and you retire. Like it would, I don't think that is a compelling enough proposition for younger people anymore. And if you think, it's just piggybacking off trends in our culture of impermanence in every aspect of life. No one wants to eat at the same restaurant every year forever.
The Snapchat of everything.
Yeah, exactly, kind of. And the issue there is that you don't become so fickle that you're just jumping in and out of things every few months. But I don't think I'd be making one specific product, no matter what it is, forever. I think the idea is that I hope to grow and evolve into different types of work as our community changes and has different needs.
Right. And just to sort of dwell on that point, this is, at least to make this part of what Single Ain't Sexy looks like for you, is kind of it's a 5 to 7 year kind of journey. Is it that order of magnitude in terms of how long it really takes for these things to get going and to get momentum and some degree of scale?
I think the direct-to-consumer brands that really want to have an impact usually do, take at least 4 or 5 years minimum to get up and running. But
Right.
I mean, there's so many outliers and so many anomalies that can't be said for everyone. One thing I find fascinating is when you are in a culture where everything feels bad. So if you think about our culture at the moment, there's this general sense, and I'm an eternal optimist, so I say this through the lens of being someone who is naturally very optimistic. There's this kind of general sense that we're all doomed.
Right.
So not only environmental issues, but global political issues and global wars and famine and
social issues, currency issues,
gender inequality and wealth inequality. There's this feeling that we're all doomed. And when there is that kind of purveying feeling in the culture, there's actually a massive kind of like pendulum swing back to being able to sell happiness. So if a lot of people feel sad or bad or anxious, then there's an opportunity to leverage that and make people feel better. And so you can call it what you want, like a market for hope or optimism. But I actually think that instead of playing on people's fears, there's a much better and more contributive opportunity to make people feel better and happier and try and bring products to market and work to market that is actually helping solve some of those issues and some of those anxieties. And so I very much see that as an area that I'm really passionate about, is trying to not like make things worse, but make them better. I know that sounds like a little bit earnest and worthy, but just at a base level, it's something I'm really interested in.
I mean, look, without going too far into the kind of mechanics of how people make decisions and identity and in a lot of respects how brands work, I think you sort of have to speak to someone's kind of, either who they are or who they want to be when you're building a brand. And like you've got, obviously coming from an advertising and brand background, have a really strong sense, probably intuition as much as anything. But I'd love, and you don't necessarily, if you don't have them now, fine, but I'd love to have some links to maybe a couple of things worth reading. I think in the last 5 years, I've had to work pretty heavily on a company that's consumer internet and went through 2 or 3 rounds of trying to work out what its brand was, like what we were and who we stood for. And it's an absolutely fascinating thing to have a knowledge of. And I think for anyone who's thinking about being part of something that has profit and purpose and is trying to, speak to themselves, but also speak to an audience, even having a base case understanding of how brands and brand strategy work, I think is incredibly powerful. So I'd love any pointers you have on that, because I think people might benefit from that. slight segue from that. Hey, I sort of want to end on a note of, and I think I know what it might be, but to correct me if I'm wrong. Like, if you're on the site and you've got some momentum and the product's interesting and there's some dynamic in there that works and the economics seems to be working, but then you sold out, as in not that you sold out in the negative way, but you sold out of the product. Like what's the thing that's really sort of like the big enabler for you here at the moment? Like, was it, hey, our manufacturer can't keep up, the scale doesn't work here in Australia? Is it a capital thing? Like, what was the thing blocking? And in a roundabout way, what's the thing that you'd really like to be able to solve that will let you take the next massive leap up, in case anyone listening might have a way to help contribute to that solution?
That is a really good question, but it's a simple question with so many convoluted answers to it. So many things have gone wrong that it is extraordinary. I have, as someone who thinks they're, a hard worker and pretty smart, I have screwed up so many things, made so many mistakes, made so many errors. There's so many dependencies in any business, especially a business that has physical products and a supply chain, that if you miss one, it has this knock-on effect, this domino effect, all these other things. So, I mean, if I think about the things that have gone wrong and then the things that we need to fix, I think it's issues around capital and just having enough cash to do big stuff. It's issues around supply chain, inventory management, cost forecasting, figuring out when we need money, why and when. Then, that to me, that's all like the kind of like, I guess you call them the more logistical elements of the business. I listened to a fascinating talk at the Retail Global Conference.
Mechanics, I call them.
Exactly, mechanics, where this really, famous e-commerce person got up and said, e-commerce is all about logistics. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I was just sitting there thinking like, oh my God, finally someone understands what I've been going through. So
someone had the balls to say
it. Yeah. Someone just said it. When someone articulates exactly your feeling at a given time, and you're just like, how did they do that? And they did that because it's a commonality that a lot of people in our role share, but you don't know about. So I think for me, it's all those things coming together. Having said that, I'm someone who's quite hard on myself because I want to do stuff well and get it right. But at the same time, the first year in any business is just a massive learning experience. So we've done some things really, really well that I'm proud of in the first year. We've messed heaps of stuff up. I think for me now, I'm doing a big project to kind of just set the business up now for the next couple of years to make sure that we're not making some of the same mistakes that we've made in that first year. And so in a funny way, I'm happy that we've had issues like selling out, can't get more stock as soon as I want. Now, before we're doing, hopefully what will end up being millions of units of product each month. Yeah, exactly. And you've just ironed out all the kinks. So look, everyone's just learning. The big kind of secret that no one tells you, especially when you start, is everyone's just making this up. Like no one actually knows what they're doing. And as soon as you realize that everyone else is making it up, it just takes a lot of pressure off your shoulders. And you're just like, all right, fine. Like, I know I don't know everything, but like, I'll learn. Like, I'll ask the right questions. I'll surround myself with good people. So it's been an interesting year, that's for sure.
Yeah. I love it. Work out what you're passionate about. Go into it with eyes wide open, accept that you're going to make a bunch of mistakes and have a laugh and have some fun, I think was your exact term along the way. Amazing. Josh, awesome chatting to you. And I feel like there was some good rabbit holes we could have gone further down, but we'll leave it there for today. But thank you again for being on the show. And I can't wait till you actually have product again so I can buy it. You don't need to send it to me. I'll buy it. I'm happy to buy it.
Thanks for having me on.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.